Hello and welcome to The Lightest Tread, the official podcast of Soul, Recork, and CO2 Negative, where we speak to extraordinary and ordinary people who do ordinary and extraordinary things that are good for their bodies, good for the planet, and typify the soul of adventure. I'm your host, Paul Morn Brown, and today I'm in conversation with Soul Ambassador and professional mountain guide, Jediah Porter. Jed spends his life moving between ski boots, mountaineering boots, and rock climbing shoes, and for the last 25 years, Jed's life has been guided by a passion for the steep. In our conversation, we chat all things mountains, why mountains make people better, and what it's like to live life as a professional mountain guide. If you enjoy this conversation, please do subscribe on YouTube and look out for our podcast arriving on your favorite podcast platform. Enjoy. All right. Hey, Jed, thanks very much for joining us.
Thanks for having me, Paul.
Yeah, sure. It's great to meet you at last. It's funny. I spend a lot of time interacting with people in a soul capacity, and very seldom get the opportunity to sit down and chat face to face, or the closest version of face to face that we have these days.
Right, yeah, this is our life now. Lots of emails and texts, and
Yeah, for sure.
then a little bit of this, and even less of the other stuff.
So I really liked how we actually got in contact with you to begin with. Was, we'll very often have people approach us um, to say, do you have an ambassador program, or can I represent the brand in one capacity or another? And sometimes we'll reach out to other people, sort of stalk them on social media. And the way it happened with you was, I thought it was really nice and kind of organic, is in that I was sitting scrolling as we do, as is sort of part of my job, and came across a reel that you had posted, of just a awesome powder day somewhere. I couldn't tell you exactly where it was, and I just commented that I'd enjoyed it to some extent. And you said, "Oh yeah, I actually wear your products in my footwear wherever I go." And I thought that was an awesome way for the relationship to kick off. Um, so Jed, tell us a little bit about where you are and what you do, and yeah.
Yeah, I'm in Driggs, Idaho, which is just a few miles from the Wyoming border on the western side of the Teton Range, the affordable side of the Teton Range. So the Teton Mountains are the principal draw here. I work as a mountain guide for the bulk of my income, and that's backcountry skiing in the winter, some winter mountaineering, spring expeditions, skiing and climbing, and then summertime rock climbing and alpine mountaineering type climbing here in the Tetons, uh, with autumn travels alternating between ski stuff in the southern hemisphere some years and rock climbing in the North American desert other
Awesome.
years.
So all things mountains.
All things mountains that don't involve water. You can't breathe underwater, so try and steer clear of that.
Yeah, well, you can't breathe if you go too high up the mountains either. But
Fair enough. Fair enough. Yeah.
so, do you spend much time in the death zone, in the fabled death zone? I
No,
guess
no, no.
not.
I've never been much above 6,000 meters. Never been to Asia at all.
Cool.
My my bulk of my mountain time has been in the Americas.
And what is it about the Tetons? I mean, do you have a special connection to the Tetons in particular? Do you choose them for is there a particular reason that you're there as opposed to anywhere else?
That's a fair question. In my view and in my experience, the Teton region, the Tetons, is the best skiing in the United States. Certain times a year, you go to other places that are better, but as a place to live and be and exist and ski a lot in all different kinds of settings, lift served and backcountry, powder snow, good terrain, access, um, a variety of access methodologies, from tons of exclusively human powered skiing, which is my thing, to more, there's a couple great resorts and snowmobile skiing and snowcat skiing, helicopter skiing. When you put all the different types of skiing together, the Tetons are the best in the country, in my view. So that's why I'm here, is the
Awesome.
skiing.
Great. And so the skiing really is, you do the mountaineering and the climbing. And I find often people will have, they'll live in a place specifically for a summer activity and then find a filler for the winter. But it sounds like you are really a skier first and foremost. That's your first passion, and mountaineering is a filler, or not.
Well, I came to skiing via mountaineering for the most part. I would
Okay.
ski occasionally, but the ski passion was born of mountaineering desires and mountaineering type goals. So I wouldn't say I'm primarily a skier. I like skiing better than I like climbing, but only by a little bit.
All right. Fair enough. So as we said, it all comes down to the mountains, and something that I saw on your website, which really resonated with me, was the idea that mountains make people better. Sort of a power statement that you have up on your site, and I totally agree. But I couldn't tell you exactly why, and I wonder if you had a sort of explanation for that thought.
It occurs to me that maybe I hope no one thought too much more about it and just stop there. Like you said, you agree, and that's good enough. Because it doesn't hold up to a whole ton of scrutiny. I mean, there's lots of things that make people better. I tend to think that following a passion makes people better. I tend to think that physical challenge makes people better. Exposure to risk and mitigation of that risk and facing the realities of risky environments makes people better. I
Hmm.
tend to think that wild places make people better. Just the existence of them, much less appreciating landscapes and circumstances and situations that aren't human made by definition. That's wilderness. Uh, and all those things come together in the mountains. Uh,
Sure.
so, but you can get that too in the ocean or in a jungle or whatever. Uh,
So is it about a sense of perspective? Is it about a sense of yourself? Is it about a sense of the way that experiencing those environments influences the way we live our lives?
uh, I think it's potentially all that.
Hmm.
Everybody's going to get something different out of it.
Hmm.
The perspective is a big one. I think wilderness is inherently like a perspective tool. To much of our lives are human centric, and that's that's awesome. But to go into a wild place where humans have minimal to no impact, uh, just points out our position in the hierarchy, if you will. And then I think there's a lot to be gained by um, just learning new things. Any new
Hmm.
thing that anyone learns is going to expand their being. And new sports are obvious in the mountains, and new places to go uh, are obvious. But there are also new circumstances, new way of interacting socially with your small little group makes a huge difference
Hmm.
for people.
Hmm.
Um, yeah.
Yeah, I often think that we live in a, you know, as you said, we live a sort of uniquely or overwhelmingly human existence, and we, I think that I think it's very useful and healthy to feel small sometimes, to feel a sense of your place. And there's little, as you said, in the ocean. I guess humbling maybe is the word I would use. It's very easy to be humbled by the ocean, and likewise on a mountaintop. And for me personally, sometimes my favorite times on the top of a mountain are when it's howling wind and you can't see further than a few meters in front of you. And um, I've personally only really experienced that inbounds in a ski resort, so it comes with a sense of safety. I know that I'm going to be okay, unless I do something really stupid. But I love the sense of, my friends get it all the time. The wind will be howling and I'll be looking around going like, oh yeah, we're on the top of a mountain. Now it feels real.
Yeah, that speaks to sort of the risk exposure side of it. I think that uh, it's healthy for us to be exposed to things where our immediate actions immediately matter,
Hmm.
and that's something we can access in the mountains. We can access that also in different circumstances, but we're also pretty darn good anymore at uh, sheltering ourselves from those circumstances where our
Mm.
immediate actions matter.
And it's the immediacy which is also important. We spend so much time stressing about what's happening a week from now, or a couple of months from now, or a couple of years from now. But to be in that situation where exactly what you do now influences your safety, or the success of your day, or even just how much of a good time you're having. And being in the mountains puts you in a place where you can focus on nothing else, not even in a high risk situation necessarily, but when you're snowboarding down a piste or skiing down a piste, you're not thinking about anything else. You're just focused on what's in front of you, and your next turn, and the next moments that you're going to experience. So I also saw there, you one of the things you say is, we go to the mountains together and you do more than you thought you were capable of, speaking to somebody who you are guiding. um and you assert that with quite a lot of confidence. And I'm wondering if that is the case more often than not. I'm wondering, how often you struggle with people who achieve less than they might think that they're capable of, or yeah, what's that dynamic really like?
One of my very first guiding mentors described the entirety of the guiding profession as realigning expectations and then exceed the new expectations. So it's
Mm,
two pronged, right? Uh, People come in with the one idea of what it's going to be like and what they're going to do, and and that's not always perfectly accurate. Uh, so that's the realignment of expectations. The exceeding those new expectations is usually a matter of greater physical toughness, physical strength, uh, than they thought possible, or greater patience, or a greater tolerance for discomfort, or what have you. Uh, Usually, regardless of what's going on with whether we got to the top or not, or what have you, the exceeding of the expectations is usually some sort of personal capability that they didn't know they had.
hmm. And that's a common, I guess it seems to infer that it's often tougher than people expect, or that you often encounter situations that require more of people than they are, not than that they're prepared to give, but than they expect to have to give.
Totally, almost all the time.
Hmm.
And it might know, like a normal day of backcountry ski guiding is 6 to 8 hours of action,
Hmm.
and people know that. Like, that's what they're paying for. Uh, Intellectually, they know that, and in an academic sense, they know that. But regularly, people have never been physically active for 6 to 8 hours in a row.
Hmm.
A really active person exercises 1 to 2 hours a day,
Yeah.
you know, and to then go 6 to 8 hours. It almost doesn't matter what you're doing. to just do that, to be on your feet, on the go for that long. And that's a super basic example of someone coming to a backcountry ski day for their very first time ever, or a basic mountaineering day where they're just on their feet for that long. And then we can go from there too. People have done all kinds of things they didn't know they could do above and beyond that.
So, speaking of which, you know, describe the range of trips that you might take people on from the most basic to the most extreme.
Yeah, seasonally depends. The midsummer routine Teton guiding I do uh, probably is the most basic. It has the most basic elements. The most basic day I might do is, you know, a kids group or a family that includes kids from age 6 and up, and we go rock climbing on a single small cliff or a small boulder even, um, for the entirety of the day. Uh, that's on the basic end. The ski equivalent would be avalanche safety courses or just an introductory uh, backcountry or side country uh, day where they're learning the equipment and such. And then the other extreme. I mean, I've guided uh, routes in Alaska that are done, 2 or 3 times a season, on site guided. The West Ridge of Mount Hunter or the Ham and Eggs couloir on the Moose's Tooth. Guided in Patagonia climbing objectives, and then I've guided routes on skis and on foot that have never been done before or never been done in a guided setting. Uh, yeah, so the whole spectrum from super basic to where I'm at my limit, and the client is a long time partner. We have this great rapport, and I'm the hired partner, the reliable position on the calendar. That's what they're buying, and
Mm.
is just a reliable partner.
There are two things I'd like to talk about. One is the sense of the rapport between you and a client, if you will, or a companion, and the other is, and what I'd maybe like to start with is, what is it about first ascents that turns people on so much, or it could be first descents? What is it about being the first person to do something like that? To do something that's in most cases these days probably not been done because other people look at it and go, "The heck no, that's too hectic for me."
Uh, there's a pride element. We like
Yeah,
being special, and
sure.
by definition you're special if you're the only person that's done it. The first person done it means you're the only. To be the first person that's done something means you're the only person that's done it,
Mm,
uh, for at least a little while.
yeah,
So we like feeling special. I think
yeah,
that's a huge part of it. Um,
sure.
there's similar, somewhat related, maybe more generous way of saying the same thing is that it's a it's a pursuit of expertise.
Hmm.
Uh, and that's what resonates with me at least is that like I do something that's never been done before, and I'm the I'm the expert on that thing for at least a little while. And that pursuit of expertise is is motivating. And when I was younger, I thought maybe that would be, and I felt that drive, and I thought maybe it would be in an academic setting, right? Like a PhD level study of
Mm,
something.
mm,
Uh, it is a expertise. That's part of the motivation for high level academic study is the desire to be the expert in that niche. And
mm,
I think there's something related there. You know, I think there's something there.
yeah, for
Uh,
sure.
and then there's also the cliched adventure thing, and for some reason the pursuit of adventure, and that language that doesn't super resonate with me.
Mm,
Uh, Personally, I know it does with a huge array of the outdoor community and outdoor profession.
mm,
Uh, the uncertainty, adventure implies uncertainty, un, unclear outcome, uh, and there's something there. I like trying something and not knowing exactly what it's going to require to complete or require to back out of. You know, I think that's the adventure element, but I have a hard time wrapping my head around that or articulating it or internalizing
mm.
the adventure part of things.
It seems like a a lot of what you do has involves a lot of that element of what's gonna be in store for me, what's not gonna be in store for me, and the almost a balance between preparation beforehand and decision making in the field. Um, so I'm interested in how much of your job is poring over. I sort of joke to people that I have a problematic addiction to the snow forecast.
Right.
It's not really a joke. I check the snow forecast far more often than I should.
Yeah.
But
Yeah.
for me, that's just because I want to get the best snow possible. For you, it's probably a far more serious set of factors. You're responsible for people's safety. You're responsible for planning trips that go ahead well. H- how much planning does it take, and how much is really sort of grind work like that in comparison to the more glamorous side of it that people would imagine exactly as you say as adventure.
I spend a lot of time organizing prior to any trip.
Mm,
Uh, and by a lot of time, we're talking hours, not necessarily days, but it depends. Like an example today I skied uh, right here close to home, Teton Pass. Uh, it was for fun. It's not. There's always work, you know. I test gear. I film educational content for a business partner. But it was not guiding, and we just chatted along the way. It was basically a recreational ski day, um, and we were out for like 4 hours, I think. Uh, really good skiing for April, kind of unheard of.
yeah.
And the baseline routine that I'll do for a day like that is I spent about 15 minutes last night uh, texting with the buddy about the rough plan, and then I spent about 6 minutes this morning reviewing the overnight weather history and the today's weather forecast, with a few other prompts about how does that match with the plan that we made last night, so on and so forth. Uh, so what's that add up to? 20-25 minutes for 4 hours.
Hmm.
Um, and that's a fairly typical ratio for stuff here close to home or places I've been before or places I have a high level of familiarity. If it's somewhere else, last autumn, September of 21, I guided a first ascent over in California, and I first scouted it in like 2011, first tried it in 2012. And then in 2017, I looked at it again. In 2020, we tried to go. Each of these episodes involve multiple map exchanges and satellite imageries and new higher resolution satellite imagery and discussions with colleagues and such. Uh, so a process that spanned a decade. and ended up in a 6-day execution.
A decade well spent. When you get to the end of day 6, you think, oh yeah, 10 years of my life worth it.
Yeah, yeah. I mean, I did a thing
Sure.
or two otherwise in there too, but uh, and that wouldn't have gone as well if it hadn't been for the extensive preparation.
Sure. Sure. So it's
Yeah,
a process of it's almost like you said in terms of expertise. It's a process of generating familiarity either by regular exposure or by carefully, methodically looking at something until you feel almost familiar with, even if it's not your backyard, as it is in the
right.
case of a 4-hour ski trip this morning. It's something that you feel familiar enough with in your mind because you've looked at it in this many
Yeah,
different ways over this amount of time.
yeah. And there's always going to be some level of uncertainty,
Sure.
and therefore there's going to be that adventure. In my view, the preparation allows me to just go further and steeper and cooler
Hmm.
before it gets adventurous. You know, there's
Hmm.
there's a general underlying sentiment in certain communities and circles that too much preparation takes the fun out of it, takes the adventure out of it.
Hmm.
Uh, I mean, if you're going to the same mountain over and over and over again, like the way to make it uncertain is to just obscure the weather forecast from yourself, say, or whatever, you know.
Hmm.
But if you want to go further and rowdier and more unknown, untrammeled, you need to lay the groundwork in order to get to where the adventure starts.
For sure.
Uh, not necessarily geographically, but sometimes it is just as simple as geography.
Yeah. So speaking of groundwork, uh, I'm interested. Growing up as a kid in South Africa, if you ask someone who was surfing regularly, "Oh, what do you want to be when you grow up?" you would say a professional surfer, or someone who played rugby would say, "I want to be a professional rugby player." And I would assume that skiers here would say, "Oh, I want to ski in the Olympics," or whatever it might be. I don't know how many would think of ski guiding as a way to live in the mountains and ski in the mountains. Um, you say yourself on your website that uh, that you spent your 20s trying to get it out of your system, and then in your 30s you realize that it actually was your system.
Hmm.
So I'm interested in how does a person go about what you do? How do you go about becoming qualified, gaining the experience, and getting yourself into a position to be able to do this, to getting to that level of expertise and familiarity, to feel confidence in taking other people's lives in your hands, essentially.
Yeah, someone's got to plant the seed, right? And I grew up. My parents are outdoorsy and
Hmm.
like hunting and fishing, and they built a cabin in the woods. And
Hmm.
uh, my mom hunts deer every year. Uh, so in a rural life sort of way, we were outdoorsy.
Hmm.
Um, and in a they did it to me by providing me with like adventure literature. That's always the an amazing seed planter, right?
Yeah.
So books on polar exploration and basic
Hmm.
mountain,
Hmm.
historical mountaineering and stuff like that was my
Hmm.
initial exposures. I never thought of it as a career until I went away to college. I thought I was going to work in forestry or agriculture or something. I knew I wanted to work outdoors. Didn't know those are the things I knew of. But in college, I was exposed to sort of the outdoor professions,
Hmm.
instruction, guiding, land management, sort of the wilderness professions, I guess I'd say. To the point where in my cohort was in the University of Maine in the late 90s, and that at that time, there's uh, four of us who peripherally like knew each other, and all have gone on to be internationally certified mountain guides. So sort of an exciting little time and place. I didn't know
Hmm.
any of those other folks super well, but there's just this buzz of like you can be a professional in the wilderness in steep environments, you know,
Yeah.
and that was my it came onto my awareness, and I had skied a little bit as a kid and got into backpacking and mountain biking as a teenager, and then got into had friends who rock climbed during college, had basic exposure to all that. For some reason, there's lots of angles you can go. I also had exposure to like river sports and
Hmm.
uh, ecotourism type opportunities. I could have gone into wildlife tourism or raft guiding or backpack guiding or bicycle instruction or whatever. I had a lot of low level exposure to lots of different things, but for some reason, I gravitated towards what we call mountain guiding, climbing and skiing,
Hmm.
even though I wasn't much of a climber or a skier at the time. So I got through college with that idea, like I want to be a mountain guide, and but I wasn't much of a climber or a skier, so I moved after school to Bishop, California, where you can climb and ski a lot at a high level. Uh, and fell in with a good community of people and improved my own personal climbing and skiing before I got my first basic guiding job there, and then started the formal training and certification process for guiding is administered by the American Mountain Guide Association. And that's a series of courses and exams in three major disciplines: rock climbing, mountaineering, and skiing, backcountry skiing, human powered skiing. Worked my way through that while also guiding more, excellent mentorship. Um, for took 6 years or so to do that certification process. Finished that in 2013, which opened a bunch of doors, mainly just in my own uh, sense of possibilities. Started traveling more for work, guiding higher end objectives, and it went from there. And at this point, that that training and certification process is not required in most circumstances in the United States, which is kind of weird. And many clients don't know that, just assume that there's a certification process. But if you throw a dart at a list of guides in the United States, you might hit someone who has formal training, and you might not.
That
Um,
blows my mind. Yeah, I would have thought
yeah,
that it
yeah.
would be impossible to do without accreditation.
Certain places require it. Certain national parks and such require
Hmm.
something, and it's the
Hmm.
requirements are vague,
Hmm.
actually. And then some employers are now requiring it, uh, and the many clients are coming up to speed on it. But there's so this internationally recognized level of certification. I acquired it entirely in the United States, actually with a little bit of coursework in Canada. Uh, but in the there's 6,000 or so worldwide guides like that. Most of them are in Europe. I think 5,000 of them are in Europe or something. And here
Oh wow.
in the U.S., there's 180 or so now, 170, something like that.
Hmm.
Uh, Maybe not even that many, 150. I don't know. I was the 87th person to do it when I did it in the United States.
Wow. So it's a relatively young profession in a way.
Yeah. Well, the profession's old. The profession's been around. Even here in the United States, like there are guide services that have been operating continuously for 80 years.
Hmm.
Uh, but the internationally recognized, formalized, third party accreditation is much newer.
Right. Okay. And you can use that accreditation wherever you end up going in the world. It allows you to, well, most places wherever there are mountains.
Yeah, many
Yeah.
places, and there are immigration matters, and
Sure.
different countries have different concerns and
Sure.
such like that.
Sure.
But yeah,
It interests me that it requires you to be competent in uh, mountaineering and rock climbing, that you couldn't, or could you just do it for skiing, for backcountry skiing?
Yeah, it wouldn't be internationally recognized at that point. You can do any one of them, any part of the process you can do. It's an Alps thing. Mountain guiding started in the Alps,
Hmm.
and the certification process started there. And to make a living year round there, you have to ski and climb, and or at least historically. Uh, so that the certification standards have always included climbing and skiing, with some exceptions, regional exceptions. I guess Ecuador, you can get to be an internationally certified guide without skiing. Used to be in Great Britain, you could get an international certification without skiing.
Hmm. Okay.
But for the most part, you got to ski and climb. Here in the States, Canada for sure, you got to ski and climb.
So I was thinking, you were talking about your your ski this morning, and uh, you gave little air quotes when you said just for fun, because there's always something going on that you're working on. Um, I've always found the most one of the most frustrating or misleading, I think, cliches that gets thrown around is do what you love and you'll never work a day in your life. Um, and I'm like, yeah, well, or the thing that you love will just turn into your job, and there's a chance that with that you'll end up loving it a little bit less. Could be. Um, I wonder if you find that at all. Does it feel like work to you?
Yeah, yeah. Like there's a financial pressure to do so.
Hmm.
Like if I don't go get up at 5:30 and do my morning homework and drive to meet the clients, like I'm not going to get paid, and that's not going to happen. So that pressure alone, it changes the experience. Uh, there's a the biggest difference between today and a day of guiding is the social level of it. Uh, for better or for worse, there's pros and cons. Because in guiding, the social roles are perfectly clear. Uh, and corollary to that is that the responsibilities are perfectly clear. The hierarchy is clear. I'm in charge. Uh, but that means that, like, we know who's going to make the decisions. It also means that I have to make those decisions.
Hmm.
Uh, and if I forget my boots, like, I ruin someone else's day. When it's me and my buddy today, like, we're going to make those decisions together, which has its pros and cons also. Uh, but if I forget my boots, or if I'm not feeling it and I want to turn around and go back down, like, I'm not going to ruin someone else's vacation.
Hmm. And you're also not with your buddy. It's not just about who's making the decisions, but I come back to the idea of being responsible for other people's safety. That's got to come with a pretty large amount of pressure.
Yeah, it's never bugged me though.
Hmm.
I don't know. Definitely, like, that has driven colleagues right out of the business.
Hmm.
I don't know. I have pretty high tolerance for that. I don't mind. I like it. I have a great deal of confidence in my own abilities.
Yeah.
I think I have a
Sure.
real level of confidence in my abilities, a defensible
Hmm.
level of confidence in my abilities.
When you say your abilities in that situation, do you mean your abilities to assess conditions and make decisions? Do you mean your ability, your I assume, rather than your skiing ability or your climbing ability?
No, they're all the same thing in a lot of situations. But yeah, mainly the decision making abilities and everything for which I am responsible. I'm pretty confident I'm capable of, you know.
Hmm. Hmm.
And that's a perhaps a potentially fraught state of mind. And I've had moments and periods of time with lower confidence in my capabilities. But the so that's why I say it's a real confidence versus false confidence or what have you.
Mm. And so there's the issue of the social dynamic, which I find really interesting. When you're undertaking, obviously when it's it might be a different type of social dynamic that's a pressure when it's six kids on one boulder and what have you. But when it's a serious expedition of potentially life threatening proportions and you're working as a team, I assume in a lot of instances it's not you taking people. You might be the lead or the guide, but everybody's safety relies on the competence of everybody in the group in many circumstances, I would imagine. um, Speak a little bit more about how you assess those. I mean, do you say no to people ever? For instance, I saw you had a on your 2021 year report. uh, you had a note about completing a tour with a 70-year-old client. um, and it just crossed my mind. How do you account for? How do you assess somebody like that's fitness and general level of health? How do you account for people's state of mind? Mental fortitude. Do you only undertake big, potentially high risk trips with people that you know quite well, uh, or do you go through a process of getting to know people before you undertake those sorts of endeavors with them? How does it work?
Multi-pronged, all the above. You're pretty well tuned in. It seems like the first of all, the progression of what we do together. That any particular partnership, you know,
Mm,
starts out less committing and goes from there. You know, uh, that's sort of baked in. So we're not gonna go and do the raddest stuff the very first time we meet. Uh, might do the raddest thing they've ever done, but it's not gonna be the raddest stuff I've ever done. You know, uh,
sure. Yeah.
so that's just built in margins
Mm,
for error and margins for differing abilities and
mm,
tempered commitment or measured commitment. Uh, and then even prior to that, you know, initially meeting someone, the ref, many of the clients I work with have also worked with colleagues, and
okay.
we talk. The
Yeah.
colleagues, I talk with my colleagues about
Hmm,
the person and the person's abilities. Uh, I speak, I communicate with clients beforehand. Uh, Anytime I can, anytime the business situation allows for it, I personally speak directly with the person I'm going to go in the field with. That's not always the case with the guides and guide services. And guide services sometimes don't build that in, but uh, really, really, really like to interact directly with the person on some level prior. And phone is nice, in person's even better, but text and emails actually work, and with the right questions, uh, and then the right interpretation of what they're saying, I can get a pretty good handle on what people are capable of. You know,
hmm,
uh, what's your experience and background with climbing, if any? You know, what are your goals
hmm,
for this day and beyond in terms of climbing?
hmm, hmm.
Uh, and
Yeah.
open-ended questions like that, and then some interpretation and follow-up and discourse from that, plugged into, you know, a decades old algorithm that that can calibrate and adjust and act and come up with a pretty good vision of what people are capable of.
It's an interesting idea to be the person who is offering a service, but then to be vetting the people to whom you are offering the service, which in you would think almost all circumstances would be the other way around. You know, you most cases, if you're in the market for a service, you go on Google and read somebody's reviews or whatever it might be. You speak, maybe you get a personal reference from a friend. Oh, go and use this company. They were super great for me. Um, but it's an interesting dynamic that there's it probably works both ways in your situation of, oh, don't guide that guy. That guy was a nightmare.
Yeah, the closest analog is medical professions, right?
Hmm.
A doctor
Yeah.
isn't going to just show up and cut somebody open. They're going to learn their health history and ask them some
Hmm.
questions and take some take some vital signs first, you know.
Yeah.
Not that I'm a doctor, but
No, sure. But also on the flip side is if the doctor's not risking his life if the patient is beyond help or what have you,
yeah, that's
there's no
true.
situation
Fair enough.
in which the doctor's patient is going to potentially threaten his existence by being stubborn or
I'm so much better than a doctor then in that way. I'm cooler than I'm more badass than a doctor because
That's definitely more badass. I think we
it's
can
not
we can
true.
agree on more badass.
No, I just take people on vacation.
So speaking of badass, I enjoyed the picture that you posted a while ago of you skiing with what would normally be a little buggy attached to the back of a bicycle, which I assume
Oh yeah,
your very fresh child is in there.
yeah,
Um,
yeah.
how's that? How is it being a dad, a new dad, and balancing your passions and your work with having a kid?
It's freaking awesome.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's different. Life is different. She's 8 weeks old tomorrow, next day, day after tomorrow. Uh, yeah, it's pretty darn cool. It's in terms of like mountain stuff seems pretty trivial anymore. In some ways, I'm still very very motivated to go to the mountains and still feel very good going to the mountains and professionally, with another mouth to feed, I got to go to the mountains.
Yeah.
Uh,
Yeah.
but also like there's just life is way bigger now with a baby in the mix. I couldn't do what I do in the mountains without decades of building the system. You know, I would not want to be a new mountain professional and also add a baby in. Uh, and my wife and I have worked together for a while to build this system together. We have a great system, obviously, and man, new moms work like crazy.
In terms of, are you talking about in terms of your time and in terms of just organizationally a system?
Yeah, time, organizationally,
Yeah.
financially,
Yeah.
it's a huge one. Um,
Mm.
and we've built a life here in the mountains where I can, you know, change a baby's diaper and then drive and go skiing and come back with my clothes still damp and change the next diaper. Uh,
Mm.
so it fits into life. Uh, the mountains fit
Mm.
into the family life because of where we are and that my skis live right next to the door and my little things like that.
Mm. Well, speaking as somebody who grew up just about as far from snowy mountains as you can imagine in the very south of the African continent, I can say with some confidence that that's a lucky child to be born into those circumstances. Well, from my perspective, I guess I should also just really love the mountains.
Yeah,
Um,
she's gonna hate some parts of his life just because she's supposed to hate everything that her parents do, right? I think we're real about that. But
yeah,
she'll
for
she'll
sure.
she'll she'll go on to live in LA and when she's finally When she's 25, she can finally brag about going skiing when she's 3 weeks old. She might appreciate it then, and that's all I need.
Fair enough. All right, awesome, Jed. Well, speaking of, I know that you might have diaper change duty to get back to there, so I won't take up any more of your time. But I
It's
really
not just
appreciate
diaper
you.
changing, but I realize that that's all I described, but not having a baby. But we also just sit and look at each other and
Yeah,
sort of talk to each other.
fair,
She's pretty cool.
cool.
Yeah.
Take it in. Just sit and absorb. Great. Well, you go do that and enjoy. And thanks very much for your time. I appreciate it.
Yeah. Excellent. Yeah. Thank you, Paul.